Okay, so let's go into resumes. So one of the things that I stress with our resume is having like that first paragraph at the top of your resume being a bit of human voice and really telling about who you are. It's a bit uncomfortable because it's not the typical business jargon, but it gets people noticed. And so when I meet with my clients, I actually typically have them do a strengths profile, and then we weave some of that strengths language into their opening paragraph on their resume. But it's really about being able to describe yourself and your achievements in a way that as if you're talking to someone instead of being very robotic. So there's a way that you can do this, and I'll share some examples with you in just a minute. So this is an example here. So this is the same person. She wrote that she's a motivated admin professional skilled in Microsoft Office applications, detail-oriented, looking for a new challenge. She changed that and she changed it to say, I'm an admin assistant looking for a busy office to organize. My strength is in managing an overbooked CEO's schedule and commitment so that he or she can focus on leading. That got her the job. Just by changing that language, it got her noticed. There were 200 other applicants. So it's all about being able to really help people relate to what you do best. And let me show you a real life resume. Okay, let me know if everyone can see this resume. So it's got Julie Patel at the top. And there's a few things that I'd like to point out that are not good in this resume, even though it looks quite nice. There's really no typos in it, no spelling errors. It looks really good. But it's probably going to be tossed out. And this was a client of mine. I've changed the name, and she got a job in May, in the height of the lockdown. Things were not good. So the reason she got a job is because I helped her change her resume, and I will show you the new version first, but I would like to show you in this version that there are many things that needed to change. So first of all, I know it seems very pedantic, but it's her font. So this font is kind of like a typewriter font, and it's very hard to read when you're reading 200 resumes. So we changed that. In Australia, there is no need to list your address, your home address, because people will discriminate no matter who you are. They will assume you don't want to travel 45 minutes. The other candidate that lives 15 minutes is probably a better fit. Don't let them make that decision for you. Take off your address. If you have to list a suburb, just list Sydney, New South Wales. And the only contact details you need at the top of your resume is your name, your mobile number, and your email address. And then for many people, I have them put the LinkedIn URL as well. All of these accreditations and qualifications are great, but Australia values experience more in the private sector than they do all of the education. I hate to tell that to some of the migrants that have had a great deal of education, but they're still interested in what experience you have, particularly in Australia. This profile statement at the beginning is way too long. So you need one paragraph, maybe 4 or 5 lines, being short and sweet and saying, this is who I am. This is the type of role that I'm looking for. This is a very long-winded, and one of her strengths is she's got communication. So she is a very good writer, but we just need to trim it down. And then she's got a whole section on key areas of expertise. Again, these are motherhood statements, and what I mean by that is they're not giving specific examples of those skills. So for example, where she says she's demonstrated capability in documenting client needs, give a story about that. I had to document the business requirements for a new department that was being formed at this company, and it took me 3 months, but I was delivered and got an award for it, or something a bit more specific. Then she goes into some really highlight achievements, but it's like a whole page. Then she goes into personal dimensions. So I think there's just too much, By the way, her third page, this is complete error, is blank. That would get your resume thrown out as well. Sorry, my touchscreen. Then you go into each of her jobs and her job history, and it looks okay, but it's really long. So she's got like a whole page for each job that she's had over the last few years. By the way, 10 to 15 years of job history is adequate. And then maybe each job should be like half a page. Focus more on the achievements than the duties, because most people know nowadays what the duties were of the job titles. They really want to know, how did you make it better while you worked there? And the longer you worked there, the more achievements you should have. So nowadays, everybody is looking for achievements. And then, so should we go through the job history? This resume is 9 pages, should only be maximum 4 pages. And then at the very end, she's got all of the education, which is fine. Some other courses that she's taken. She's given her references up front. I never encourage people to do that unless you're in high school. High school, you can give your references up front, but anybody else, you should have the choice of having that interview and deciding if you want to work there before you provide your contacts. And by the way, you don't want them to get a surprise call giving you a reference and they're a bit cranky because they weren't given a heads up on that. So it's better for you to hold back your references. A lot of companies move it to a third party for reference checking anyway, so you don't really have to give those upfront anymore. So that's the bad resume. Now, let me show you the resume that got her hired. So this is how we changed it to the new resume. So at the top, you've got her name. She's left the one credential, which is fine. She's got her URL link for her LinkedIn, and then she's got a very succinct personal profile objective statement. It's got a bit of human voice in that. And then she's listed her capabilities, and she's given very specific examples of when she had demonstrated those capabilities. She's also made it easy for the person looking at her resume. Here's her resume, her work history all at a glance. Then below, she goes into more detail on her work history. So she's shortened it to be, less space dedicated to the duties and responsibilities and more space related to the achievement. So it looks much better. This got her the job. So now she's working at Vodafone in governance as a manager. So she's doing great. And then she's got her education. So we really shortened that resume from 8 or 9 pages to 4. And this got her actually 2 callbacks once she found a job in like 2 to 3 weeks by using this format. So now I see a question pop up. So would we call it a resume or a CV? That's a great question. In Australia, nobody really cares or differentiates it. In actual fact, a CV, a curriculum vitae, is a long, full history of your job history and all the academic papers that you've written or associations that you belong to. So generally, its CV is more attributed to the education sector or the medical sector. But for the working world, the resume is more appropriate because that just gives them a snapshot of who you are, what are your capabilities, and what types of roles are you looking for. So the resume is usually shorter. It's all kinds of different formats. I still, even when clients come to me, I don't force them to go into this template, but if the resume needs an overhaul, then I suggest that we go into this template. So yeah, so a resume is a bit more loosely defined. So that is a great question. Okay, so that's it on the resumes, and I'll go through the do's and don'ts in a sec, so hope you guys are okay with me bouncing around here. Sorry, let me go right back up. Okay, so resumes, 3 to 4 pages, job history, 15 years max. Definitely explain your job gaps. You can list it as study, travel, country relocation, having a child. All of those things are acceptable now. Try to use 11-point font size on your resume because it's easier to read if you're reading 200 resumes a day. If you're changing industries, definitely make the front page a summary page. That way you haven't lost their attention. You only have 6 seconds to get their attention, or they might discard your resume. Do list achievements. Save a longer version, a master resume version, because maybe some things you want to highlight your procurement experience and other things you want to highlight your project management experience. So some people have those varied backgrounds, and so you want to play up the things that matter to the job that you're applying for. Let's see, don't show home address. We talked about photos. I have agreed for people in like public relations or maybe even marketing to put a photo, but otherwise it's discouraged. I used to be an HR director, and generally we would discard all resumes with a photo because we didn't want to be seen as discriminating for hiring for appearance or against hiring for appearance. Okay, I've got another question. So one page, hi Wakar, is fine, or is it mandatory to make resume more than one page? Look, a one-page resume is generally more accepted for high school students, for executives, or if you're just getting started out in your career. If you're summarizing too much, your resume might be thrown out for not showing, like for example, if you show that you worked at 1 or 2 places, but you only put the year, they might think you're hiding something. So you've got to put the month start and year and this month end and year. Because they want that information. They want to be able to verify your employment at previous places. So depending on your occupation, if you're a photographer and that's the type of jobs that you're going for, then maybe a one-page resume is okay if it can fit all of your experience and a bit of your achievements. Okay, good questions. Thanks, you guys. Now, let me show you a cover letter. This is a targeted cover letter, and this is for a lady in HR. So she writes that she's applying for this job. She makes it very clear so that if the company's advertised multiple jobs, they know she's applied for this title, People and Culture Manager. She talks very briefly. I have worked in HR, organizational development, as well as admin and generalist roles. She talks about the scope of the company that she's worked for. And then she even says, I'm seeking a challenging position after raising 2 small children. So she's being open to the fact that she's been on maternity leave. She's ready to get back in the game. And so people are much more open to that nowadays. They don't discriminate as much if you've been on maternity leave. And then she actually uses the terminology pasted exactly from the advertisement in Seek. So they want a strong generalist background. So she picked, I think they had 6 bullet points. She picked these 4, and then she listed how she has, she meets those criteria. She gives very specific examples. So it kind of makes, like, let's say the HR person that's recruiting for the role have no idea about what an IT engineer does. This makes their job easier by you putting in their criteria and you listing how you meet that criteria. Check. You get an interview. So make it easy for them. So you shouldn't be customizing the resumes. You should be customizing the cover letters. And then this is just a little extra touch that I help with my clients. So after reading your ad, I saw that you will have an empathetic approach and the ability. So you're quoting their words and you're saying that very much aligns with my natural strength. So it's just another way to impress the recruiter or whoever the person is that's gathering the resumes. So that's it for now for the resumes and cover letters, I think. Don't show your religion, don't talk salary. We'll talk about that in the interview. PhD, people aren't that enamored of it, but you should still list it on your resume. You just don't have to list it at the top unless it really relates to the role. Okay, now let's go on to interviews. So interviews, you should always expect the very first question because they want to get a flavor of who you are when they say, tell me about yourself. Now, most people will go through and recite their resume and their work experience. This is not what they want. They want you to say, I moved to Australia with my husband and 3 children. My kids are, in university, and I found that through volunteering, I really love helping women, and just anything, like I'm mad about race cars. Whatever your hobbies are, this is a time to actually give them a bit more of your personality. So Aussies want you to be more open and more vulnerable to talk about yourself. And then you can also say, I found my passion in this industry when I got the opportunity to work for a client or work on a project, or, you can still segue a bit into your business, but it's more an opportunity for you to talk about who you are. And then you could also, you need to also prepare some statements of what your strengths are. And there's a whole bunch of tools online, but I'll share one with you that I really like. So share what your strengths are and be prepared with examples. So, I'm really organized. For example, I often organize my family gatherings and events. I'm very much analytical. I love to review all the data and the facts before I make a decision, which I did recently when I purchased a new laptop. Just things like that. So they're real life stories. Now, I was talking with a uni grad yesterday, and she was like, Robin, you really need to tell people about the STAR. And the STAR is what we call an acronym, and I'll share more on this in a minute, but it stands for situation, task, action, result. It's a way of storytelling. So you start with telling them where you worked, how new you were, what was your task, or what was your responsibility in your role, and then what was the problem, and then what was the action that you took to resolve that problem, and what was the result. So you need to prepare, like it's almost a table that you would write out on a piece of paper with 4 lines, 2 columns, and you would write out a teamwork story in 1 star table. You would write out a communication story in 1 star table, a technical story, a problem-solving story, a leadership story. So my daughter just had a nursing grad interview a week ago, and she talked about a communication story where the phone that was supposed to be the emergency phone for all the nurses was broken. She took the action to say, okay, I'll use my phone for the day. She went and found every single nurse that was on duty to let them know what her number was and that they should call it until the phone was fixed. And so that was an example of communication. And as a result, they all thanked her for stepping up and solving that problem without them having to worry about other things in their day. So that's kind of following the situation, the task, the action, and the result. And then asking great questions. So I find that people, particularly that they're so anxious and eager to get a job, they don't want to ask any challenging questions. That is a mistake. You need to ask some really thoughtful questions like, what are the top 3 challenges in this job if I'm successful? Or how do you find working at this company? Can you tell me more about your career? Or the really good question that's getting brownie points from the interviewers is, do you have any hesitations about me performing the role? And that gives you instant feedback. And I hate to say, in Australia, you don't get a lot of feedback after your interview. You don't get a call back. So it's a really great way to figure out whether you did well or not. And they're impressed as well. Okay, so tips on Aussie culture really quick. So if you took a job at, let's say, BP Oil just to pay the bills, you are already discriminated against because that's not your career choice. So we've got to work harder to overcome that, especially if you've worked there for a year or more, because you don't want to say you haven't worked in a year. You do want to say that you have worked, but maybe while you studied or while you waited for your visa. But just be aware that Aussies will judge you based on your last job. So when I was a corporate services director and I was applying for new roles, nobody would call me back because I wanted a project management role, but I hadn't done that for a few years. Even though I had managed projects and my title was corporate services director, they weren't interested in that anymore. So I kind of had to reshape my resume, and I had to do more networking to find those opportunities. Credibility is much more important nowadays. So people just listing all their skills is no longer going to cut it. You have to list your capabilities and your skills, but list examples of how you have those skills. Achievements are really important in your job history. If you've had a long, wonderful career, you can even put, I'm working with an executive right now where we're putting a lot of his awards and achievements that he's had over the years for excelling in his sales departments. And then asking good questions, which I talked about, and persistence. So, there's a rule that I give to my clients, which is kind of the 3-strike or 3-attack rule. So, send them a LinkedIn invite, send them an email, send them or make a phone call. 3 ways of contact actually starts to get your name in their mind, and it moves you up the pile of resumes so that you can possibly get an interview. So persistence does pay off as long as you're polite and as long as you don't ask them to call you back. So if you leave a message, I will call you again later, or in the email, I'll call you later this week. So always put the action back on yourself so that they don't feel like you're demanding anything of them. This is the STAR that I was talking about. So using the situation, task, action, result, you would tell a story. So this is a story from a client. So tell me about a time when you worked with someone you didn't like. I was newly hired as an all-rounder at a cafe in a shopping center. On my second day, I was asked to fill the orders to make sandwich, which I'd never done before. I asked one of the ladies, the senior ladies, a question, and she was not helpful. She yelled at me. And this was a young lady that was a teenager at the cafe. So she found another person that did help her. And then she realized how she was going to work with this person. She got the food order done, and she minimized her interactions with this lady so that she didn't cause conflict. So she was always polite to that person. So it's a good story because everybody works with someone we don't like. You do need to have that story under your belt, because they won't believe you if you've said, I've never worked with someone I haven't liked. Even in university or school, you generally have people that either don't pull their weight or dominate the project or the deliverable. So that's the STAR. So this is the table that I'm encouraging you all to have on a piece of paper. And have those stories, bring them to your interview, have them available in front of your desk. If you're doing a webcam interview, it is okay to refresh your memory. And make sure if you have a teamwork story and a leadership story, they're not the same situation. So the more scenarios and the more employers that you can give those STAR stories, the more believable it is, because you've demonstrated those skills multiple times. So yeah. The STAR is a really great method that people need to use both in speaking and even in writing a bit, in telling. So some people write their achievements, but they forget to write the result. The result was employee morale was improved, or the result was the boss thanked me by giving me a bonus or something like that. Okay, so to wrap up interviews, do's and don'ts, definitely dress up. Even if you're doing a webcam interview, I had a client, he said that he was interviewing with Fuji Xerox, a manager and a senior manager, and they both thanked him when he showed up on the webcam in a suit and tie. They were so pleased because they must have done other interviews for that short list and people just didn't make the effort. So definitely make the effort. It sets you apart. Prepare your stories, research the company. When I was an HR director, my HR recruitment team would ask new hires, what did you think about our website? You can tell really quickly who had not researched the company at all and just showed up to the interview. So research the company, know enough to ask some knowledgeable questions. It shows that you care and shows that you are more passionate about the job. Show that you've learned from mistakes. So be prepared for the question. I had someone that got asked this recently, what was your biggest failure? And they're asking that to know how you learned from that mistake and how you applied it to your future learning. So be really smart on the mistake that you choose. It doesn't always have to be work, but have that story prepared. do be yourself. Do send a thank you note. I get asked this. Yes, definitely. If you have their contact details, send a thank you text, email, letter, whatever you like. Just looking, don't forget to bring questions. Do the star pose. So the star pose is for people that are particularly nervous and before an interview. Go to the reception and check in, and then go to the bathroom or the toilet really quick and do the star pose. So if you're standing, this is what the Olympic athletes do after they run the finish line. So this is psychologically helping you breathe and calm your brain down. So it really does work if you hold your hands up or put them on your hips. It's called the power pose. And there's a TED talk on that you can look up. That's by a psychologist, a famous TED talk. Try not to ramble. Even if you're watching their body language, you can stop and say if they look bored, if they're looking at their watch, looking up at the ceiling, looking at each other. Am I answering your question correctly? So that they can give you clarification, and then you can stop going off on a tangent. Sometimes people provide too much detail. You really need to get good at summarizing. And don't be afraid to say once, sorry, I'm really nervous. Can I start over? Or so everybody understands that. And even if I told you at the beginning of today's session, so sorry, folks, I'm really nervous, your usual typical response of people in my workshops is they feel empathy for me, and they feel their approach to me is a bit more gentle. And the last tip I'll give you is turn off your self-camera view so that it's not distracting. You can be yourself, try to have energy, try to be in a place that's free from distractions and that you feel happy to do the interview and you're not worried about people walking around or hearing. So that's my tips for interviews. Now, let's talk about knowing what you want. So a lot of people that I work with are like, well, I'll take any job. That is a negative when you respond that way. So you really need to dive into what are your qualities that you love, what appeals to you about this job. So for example, project manager, one of my strengths is organizer. I love organizing people. I love juggling all the balls in the air. I've always done it even since I was a kid. So just giving a bit of more insight into why you want this role or this industry, but also knowing your limitations. So if you're a big picture person and you like ideas, own it. If you're a detail person and you like to have spreadsheets all worked out, own it. Like proclaim that strength and give stories about how you're good at that strength. So generally, those strengths that we're just now giving as examples do apply to the role that you're applying for. Body language is important. Eye contact, smile. It used to be a really firm handshake, but I don't need to coach that anymore. Having good posture, showing your shoulders. If you're standing, kind of put your hands on your side and not in your pockets, or put your hands behind you so that you look a bit confident. It pulls your shoulders back. And then no waffling, which means like no rambling too long when you answer a question or talk to someone. You want to give them the opportunity to talk to. Now, I mentioned earlier, why do you want this job, or why should I hire you? Please don't say, because I have the skills and experience. I worked with an IT, an IT developer, and I asked him this question when I was helping him write his resume, and he said, well, ever since I was 7 years old, I love to take things apart and put them back together. I'm like, that's brilliant. Let's put that in your resume, in your objective statement, and that gives a bit more credibility than just saying, oh, I always love picking things apart and putting them back together. So giving a real life example of why you have passion in this industry is so much better. So try to find those examples. And if you can't find those examples, talk to a friend that knows you really well to help you ask those probing questions on what draws you to this career or this job, so they can give you some words to use as well. And the reason why that people think they think if you're just going to tell me you can do the job, they don't want to take a risk on you in case you like to do something else. They're not sure that you're passionate enough about the job to stay. So you really want to share with them that this is where you want to be. Okay, the next thing is, and I'll give you a link to this profiling tool, is called Gallup Strengths. And there are 34 strengths. I am a Gallup accredited strengths coach. So I lost count, 550 strengths debrief with people. And so I know all of the strengths, and I know a lot of tendencies and behavior patterns of those strengths. I know TV shows that that certain strengths like. These are my top 5 strengths, and I've gotten very good at being able to not use the Gallup strengths terms, but use our own words to describe those strengths. So really good with people. I like to check in, even with my past clients. How's the new job going? How's the job search going? And positivity. I'm always cheery, upbeat, particularly I get some clients that are quite down, they're discouraged, they haven't been able to find a job for a while. So finding ways to lift their energy and to attack the problem in a different way. A ranger, which it is truly my strength. So even in my wardrobe, you'll find like colors, lights to darks. The pants are all together. The blouses are all together. My husband has a ranger. He does the same thing. Responsibility, very reliable, trustworthy to others, particularly when I'm delivering to other let's say I go into the CMRC, it's the Community Migrant Resource Center in Parramatta, deliver workshops. I make sure that I'm there early. I send them my slides. I print them out. So all of those things are part of my mantra that I like to be reliable. And then woo is I love winning others over. So I love meeting new people. I talk to the bus driver, I talk to the Kohl's cashier, and my kids sometimes tell me, Mom, can we just go to the store and just buy the milk and you not talk to everyone? So all of these strengths can become a weakness for me. And that is the key to answering that question, what is your weakness? So for responsibility, it can be a weakness because I sometimes can't say no. I don't want to let others down. I take on too much. Or the woo, I talk to too many people and then my family feels ignored. So just having those rehearsed in your head as well makes you, this one .NET developer, he said the manager told him he got the job because he knew what he wanted and he knew what he didn't want based on his strengths. So that was really good feedback for him. So these are all the 34 strengths. There's 4 families of those strengths. There's the doers, there's the influencers, there's the relational people, and there's the strategic thinkers. And lots of people have strengths from all 4 of the families. Lots of people have strengths in just 1 or 2. Me personally, I have strengths in doing, influencing, and relational. I don't have strategic strengths in my top 10, and that is where I use others on my team to help me do strategic thinking and strategies when I'm rolling out new services and offerings to my clients. So it doesn't mean I'm not good at strategy, because I used to do it as a director. I had to roll out strategy for a new performance review process or a new procurement tool, but I always pulled in other experts to help me do that. This is just a sample of the strengths report that you get back right away. It's $33. This is the URL link. Again, we'll share this information with you, but it's actually quite helpful for people to do it. If you want to know your top 10 strengths, it costs more like $80. And it's totally worth it for people who aren't sure what career they should be pursuing. Then we look at the top 10 strengths. Now, Gallup has done a heap of research, and what they found is if you know what your top strengths are and you can do them every day at work, you are 6 times happier at work and you are 3 times happier in your personal life. That is why I'm so passionate about the strengths tool. Okay, and then the next thing, the last thing that we'll talk about is the job search strategy. And so it's not enough these days to just look at the online advertisements. That is only delivering like 20, I'd say it's more closer to 20% of jobs nowadays. In fact, I've listed a few people that have found jobs, and out of the 5 in the last let's say, month, um, 3 of them found jobs through their network and 2 of them found jobs through applying online. So it's really important that you're not just focusing your energy on the job advertisements. You need to be networking and talking to others as well that might know of opportunities. And I'll talk to you a bit more about that. So by the way, these are headhunters, like the direct approach networking, recruiters and headhunters, and then companies that advertise jobs. And then networking and direct approach is actually going, knocking on a door and saying, hey, do you have any openings? My son did that. He wanted to work at a party store and he walked in and he got the job. So good for him, because he had been trying for a year just to find a part-time job when he was in high school. So the point is, there's this hidden market of jobs, and a lot more. When I looked at my last 13 jobs, 11 of them were not through online advertisements. So it is much more prevalent than I realized, and it's more important to people that are trying to find a job during COVID right now. Okay, so the other thing you need to be aware of, and I can vouch for this when I was an HR director, is HR people are looking at your social media pages. Generally, they'll look at your LinkedIn. You will never know, because they've got a corporate account that doesn't show you that they viewed your profile. So they pay a higher premium subscription to LinkedIn for that capability. They may look at your Facebook page. They may look at your Instagram page if it's targeting the younger generation. So make sure you don't have any photos on there that are overly, I don't know, angry about Trump, or, political or party views, or too much skin. All of those things may count against you. So that's something you should be aware of. And then, we want to make sure that you do have kind of a pleasant profile in each of those tools. So I particularly help people with their LinkedIn profile. So I just helped 2 clients, a podiatrist and a banker, help them rewrite their about summary in their LinkedIn profile to have a bit more human voice in it. You have to do the resume first, and then that you make sure that the job history matches your resume, which I called that out for someone recently, because recruiters will throw your application out as well. If they look up your LinkedIn profile, they find the job history is different than your resume, they think you're lying, or you're either not attentive to detail. So just be prepared for that and pay attention to it. And the other thing on LinkedIn is you can hide your profile while you're updating it and changing it. So we can show you how to do that in the privacy settings. But a lot of these platforms are being used more often to find people. So I had a lady, Narmada, who was on maternity leave. She was a cybersecurity specialist. And once she turned on her LinkedIn that she was looking for roles, somebody found her and she got a job at Deloitte. So that was great. And she got a great salary, and she had to figure out daycare. Anyway, it's a great story, but they can find you without you applying as well. Okay, and these are the helpful job websites. So we'll send this to you. I particularly love this new one that I've found, which is Work 180. And it's all about companies that are subscribing to have a diverse workforce. And it's big companies as well. So they have a whole section of job advertisements in there and companies that they work with. Beam Australia, I love, for women, but they do post part-time jobs for men as well, but it's more geared towards parents who need that flexibility while trying to raise the younger children. Puffling is really interesting, the one at the bottom, which is a lot of companies aren't educated in the idea of job sharing. So let's say you have, and I've come across this, so a department manager who only wants to work 3 days for their children, and then you have another department manager who only wants to work 3 days, and they work really well together, and they both work the off days of each other and share 1 day as handover, and they fill a job 5 days a week, or it might be 2 days and 3 days. But the Puffling website helps the 2 people find each other and then submit their application for a job to do the job sharing. So I think that's pretty innovative and pretty cool nowadays. Now, let's talk a bit about LinkedIn. So it's really good to have a LinkedIn profile because anybody should be able to get 50 contacts once you set up your LinkedIn. So it's people that you know from your school, your children's school, people that you went to school with years ago, people that do your hair, that you go to the gym with, that you play cricket with, that, you know, there's most people can come up with 50 contacts that they can connect with on LinkedIn. So it's really good to tap into that network of people you know, because they're going to feel confident about recommending you to someone that might have a job opportunity. So this is kind of the value of networking. And don't be afraid to ask strangers on LinkedIn for a coffee date and just tell them you really admire their profile and you would love to get their advice about the industry in Australia, or you've been out of it for a few years. And most people are really happy to give you their advice. If you ask them for a job, probably not get a response. And so I had a lady who had worked in software products, and she had been at the same company 17 years. She was made redundant. She heard of a company in the US that was starting a branch of their business in Australia. She contacted the head decision maker in the US on LinkedIn and said, I'm really love to work for your company. I'd love to get a job, blah, blah, blah. He never responded. He accepted her LinkedIn request to connect, but then he never responded to her messages. So she was a bit agitated. And I said, look, let's make this easier for you. Let's write him a note and say, hey, I know you're busy. I can meet with you anytime. And we calculated the time zone difference. Anytime next week, Monday through Friday between 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. your time. And he wrote back like within a couple hours and said, great, I'll have a 15-minute call with you on this date. And it became an opportunity. She went to work for them. So these are the types of things you want to place as a little pressure on someone as possible, and then make it easier as possible for them to meet up with you. I'll buy you a coffee, or I'll come to you, or I'll do a Zoom webcam for you, even if you can only spare 15 minutes just to get your advice. So be very light when you approach people for that type of information. And also be prepared for the question of what are you looking for? So if you're not clear in your head yet, you have to work that out before you have those networking meetings, because they will ask you and they will immediately start to think, how can they help you? So be prepared. And you can have two things you're looking for, but be clear on those two things. I'm looking for procurement, or I'm looking for project management. So be clear. These are some helpful TED Talks. And for particularly this vulnerability one is for people with lower confidence. So I encourage others to watch that. Amy Cuddy is the one that talks about the power pose. I love this one about Carol Fishman, because she talks about if you haven't worked with someone for 10 years, still connect with them about a job opportunity and advice, because you're frozen in time in their mind. They remember your work ethic exactly as it was 10 years, and it probably hasn't changed. So they still think really highly of you. So so don't be afraid to connect with people that you haven't talked to for 10, 15, 20 years. All right, and then the recap for today is really important to know your strengths. So go online and take the Gallup Strengths Tool profile survey. It takes about 45 minutes, 177 questions. You cannot pause it. So once you start it, you've got to be able to sit down with no distraction to complete it. You need to write a resume or a cover letter that gets you noticed. And so I've given you examples of that. If you need templates, I can share those with you. So send me an email. It's important to show passion for the role, not just the fact that you have skills and experience in that role before gets you the job anymore. You really need to show a bit more vulnerable qualities about yourself that help them understand that you really do love doing or working for that company. And then I've given you a few ideas of where to find jobs that are right for you. Some companies are so popular that they don't have to advertise roles. They only post them on their website. So set up search alerts at like 5, maybe 10 different websites that will send you alerts of job openings, so that you're always looking for those opportunities and you're aware of them when they come available. And then how to ace an interview. Using your star stories, giving them a great tell me about myself story that's not all work related, asking great questions at the end. Those are all really great ways that you can differentiate yourself in the interview. Okay, so with that, I'm going to see what questions we have. All right, so for anyone who doesn't know, I'm going to type my email address. You can find it online, but and I'll be sending all of you a debrief, like of this, not a debrief of this session, but just a thank you email for attending my session and for because you took the time to attend. Here are the slides that I'd like to share with you. And as a courtesy, I'm going to add each of you to my newsletter. So I send out monthly newsletters, sometimes every other month, every second month, but basically just helpful articles and maybe videos that I'm doing to help people, give them some tips that are working for others. So I think, Ramanpreet, I've given you the email address, so I'll give you those templates, and I'll also share with you a website page that's not visible on my website, but that I do share with my clients, that shows like all the free resources and all the free resume templates. I probably have more than what's on the website, but I don't want to muddy it up with too much content. Okay, I just want to tell you about some, while I'm waiting for more questions. Let's see, do you have any recent success stories? Yes, I do. Okay, so I have Mohammed. He found a construction engineer job through his network. Look, he had to move away, but he recognized that he had to do that. So it was in the construction industry, but he was quite excited because that was his first experience in Australia. I had Ellen, who attended my last webinar, and I got her thinking about looking at other places to find jobs. She went and looked at, it sounded like the Chinese version of Gumtree, where they don't usually post jobs, and she happened to find out of an opportunity there. Now she's working for them, so she's doing really well. Shobana, she is a lovely client that I worked with a couple months ago, and my husband needed some project work done. So now he's employed her on a part-time basis to do some project work for him. Kuma, she was a lovely lady who was not clear about her career, and she was on maternity leave. She had done quantity engineering, so that was in the construction industry. She wasn't sure she wanted to go back to it because she had a bad experience. And she, through meeting with me, we recognized through doing her strengths that quantity engineering was actually a good match for her strengths. She wanted to get into construction disputes, so she would become the mediator between the client and the construction company. I emailed her a couple weeks later. She had already gotten a new job. So I was pretty excited for her. And then let's see, Greg, he had been looking for a job for 6 or 8 months. A friend recommended me to him. We did his strengths, we redid his resume, and he got a job in customer service, kind of warehousing customer service. So that was really good. And he was in his 50s. So yeah, so those are some of the success stories. Let's see. I feel like I may have fallen into a profession. Did you say that Gallup will point you in the right direction? Yes and no. So Gallup, I did the strength survey in 2008 when I worked at American Express in America as a project manager. And I actually think I worked at IBM at the time. Nobody unpacked those strengths with me. So nobody took the time to sit down with me and help me understand them. Now, first question, those strengths are pretty much the same as they are today as a career coach, even though I've had two very different careers. However, what I realized is like that woo strength, I was very unhappy when I worked at a smaller company where I had to go into the office and stay in the office every day with 1 or 2 colleagues. So I wanted to get out and meet people. And once we realized that, my boss was like, yep, go meet people. So it's a bit, I think you need help. I think everyone needs a coach to help you unpack those strengths and actually find stories and examples that relate to your life and your behavior that help you conclude what are the right jobs that allow you to use all of those strengths. Some people really catch on to it very quickly, but most need a bit of that insight that I have because I've done over 500 strengths debriefs with people. So yes, so it is helpful if you do the Gallup Strengths Report on your own, pay the $80 to do the test. But I think there's a bit more value to be had if you do a bit more exploring around that topic. Thank you for your questions, guys. These are good. Let's see. So if you've fallen into profession, I do think you need career coaching, and you probably need to do a bit of homework activities, if not with me, with another coach that can walk you through exploring what is the right profession for you. And also it will highlight why your current profession isn't giving you excitement. So I've met with a lot of people who are really good at their jobs. Their bosses even love them, but it's like soul crushing to go to work every day, and every Sunday night is misery. So you really do need to get out of your head and work with someone else to figure out what are the roles that will give you more fulfillment. And that's what I love doing. Oh, thank you. Someone wrote that they've attended a few webinars, but none have been as thorough and insightful as yours. Much appreciated. You're welcome. Thank you. For social media, do you recommend we keep our profiles on private? I do. It depends on, if you're an open book, then it makes sense that your social media is open. Just make sure that it's all positive, clean messages. But if you're more of a private person, certainly that's okay to have your settings on private as well. And particularly if you have like certain interests, like going to Renaissance festivals or something, like maybe that's something you want to keep to you and your friends, then it's really a personal decision to put your social media profile on private. Apart from power poses, what do you recommend for people with a lack of confidence? So you deep breathing exercises right before the interview, rehearsing the tell me about yourself. So actually write out that script, that speech. It's kind of your elevator pitch. Write it out, practice it in the mirror, practice it to your dog, practice it to your partner so that it doesn't sound rehearsed after you've memorized it. And then practice your star questions. So you can book a mock interview with me, and I'll actually take you, you give me the real job advertisement that you're applying for or that you hope to attain. And then I'll pretend to be that employer. I'll ask you questions about my company. I'll ask you questions of why do you think I should hire you? I'll ask you to tell me about yourself. What are questions do you have? So we'll go through that whole rehearsal, and I'll score you on each of the criteria of an interview so that you feel better about going to that real life interview. And I'll ask you some tricky questions, and it's so much better when it doesn't count with me, as opposed to getting asked those tricky questions when you're in a live interview room or even with several panelists. Sorry, I'm just looking at these questions. Great questions. So just going back to your question about the recommendation for people with a lack of confidence, and you have done well in your short career, we need to pull out those stories and those transferable skills and how you would love to do that in the future industry that you want to go for. And you could even show personal stories. So for example, I've been an accountant, but I really want to get into interior design. I would tell stories about how I've, redone my house, or I've redone a friend's house, and now I've been asked to do it for several people. Those types of stories actually relate credibility and that you have passion and talent for the role. So it's finding those stories that transfer from where you haven't been paid to do it, but are still relevant for this future job. I hope that helps. Are we able to book appointments or calls with Robin? And do you prefer contact via email? I just implemented on my website Calendly, which allows any of you a free 15-minute talk with me to ask any other personal questions. So feel free to do that. I love helping people. If you want to subscribe, like for career coaching services, I'll have a free session with you and just tell you more about how I work with clients in your circumstances. So there's, I have probably a third of my clients are migrants, a third of them are job seekers that just need help getting that next job, and a third of them need career clarity. So depending on your situation, the approach is a bit different. So yes, happy to talk to people for free about that, and what my rates are and what you would get in as part of that service. So good questions, guys. So is there anything else that I haven't covered today? We're just about on the hour, so I'm glad we got through. Have I ever passed on a client? Ooh, that's a good question. No, I haven't passed on a client, but I have broken up with a client for not doing their homework and not following through. And it became a bit of a time waster. I would meet with them to progress to the next stage. So, but otherwise, if you're motivated and you really want to learn and you want to apply some of the advice that I provide to you, then I love helping people. And sometimes it's a slower process, depending on what industry you're targeting. And sometimes it's very quick, like Kuma, she had a job in like a couple weeks after I had met her. In fact, she was living in Indonesia and she moved to London already. So it can be very fast for some people, but yeah, it just depends on what your experience is, what industry, how competitive it is, and what's the market like in Sydney or in Australia, I should say. Good questions, guys. Any other questions? Sounds great. Look forward to working with you. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. And I will be happy to answer any other questions. Oh, how important is it to have a LinkedIn account? Good question. It is helpful if you're working anything in an office environment. I don't see many teachers or nurses have a LinkedIn account. It's kind of like maybe 30% of them have it, so they don't use it as heavily. And they have a much more structured and rigorous interview process. My oldest daughter is a high school teacher, so I can understand why LinkedIn isn't necessary. But if you're going for anything in business, a LinkedIn account is quite helpful for you. How does the job market differ from Australia compared to the US? Look, the resume advice and the LinkedIn advice is all the same. You need to talk more about your achievements, and you need to be short and sharp in how you present yourself. The difference that I've noticed is I had to go back to America for 6 months, 4 years ago. And I got a job very quickly through my network, but what I found was people were excited about all the new experience that I had built up on my resume, and then I had this varied background. But I find in Australia, it's a much more narrow-minded view that if you haven't done this job for 5 years in Australia, you don't tick the box. So it's a bit lazy, if I would admit that people can't see beyond, the fact is, you are, in my opinion, you are a better employee if you've kind of cross-trained in different departments and learned different aspects of a particular company. And that makes you more well-rounded, makes you a better leader. But yes, a lot of Australian companies that are hiring, they kind of want you pigeonholed into that one career and that one role in order to get a new job with them. So I think that's the difference that I see between Australia and the US. Very good question. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for all the great questions, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with me today, and I hope this was helpful. And again, we'll send you all the playback information, and if you do want to meet with me, I'm happy to do that, meet you in person. I've already done that with webinars attendees in the past and already helped them. So have a great day, and Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. All right, bye for now.